Welcome back to Learn Astrology with Mary. Today we're with a wonderful astrologer who's based in the USA, and his name's Adam Elenbaas. And you're in New York, is that right, Adam?
No, I used to be. I'm in, moved back home now to Minneapolis.
Oh, blimey, I'm no good on geography. So where's Minneapolis?
It's the middle of the country, along the border of Canada. So it's up north and Midwest.
Okay, and what made you move up there?
Well, that's where I was born and raised. So I had grown up here and, uh, adventured around the country a bit. And then coming back to my roots felt like best place to raise my family. I have extended family here, and my wife is from the same place too. So.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so you're returning home in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Now, you are an astrologer. You're also a yoga teacher, and you also teach astrology. Is that right?
Yeah, my wife and I owned a yoga studio for about 10 years. And so yoga has been a big part of my life. Primarily astrology, but through my wife and through the yoga studio, yoga played a pretty big role for a while.
Okay, so tell me, how did you get into astrology to start with? I always love to hear the story. So how did you first even hear that there were signs of the zodiac and a thing called astrology?
Yeah, it's a good question. Um, let's see. I mean, when I was a kid, I was a preacher's kid. And so astrology was frowned upon for the most part. But I knew that when we were looking at the story of the Magi who followed the star to the birth of Jesus, and I also saw horoscopes sitting in the doctor's office and the magazines and the waiting room, I remember thinking, there are astrologers in the Bible story. So why aren't we, like, what's that all about? And I think that was one of a number of examples where I just became quite curious about um, other religions and other parts of the world and so forth. But just I think and I grew up with a father. He was, although he was a Methodist minister, and in general the church sort of frowned upon astrology, he was very interested in Native American spirituality. One of his best friends was a Native American, and he learned to build teepees and built teepees for state parks with his best friend, and I became introduced to the idea of signs and omens in nature through that connection that my dad had to Native American spirituality. And so I think at an early age, it was a combination of curiosity and taking an interest in the idea of signs and omens, divination, and things like that. And those sort of planted the seeds. And I wouldn't become more formally interested until, later. But I think those were the original seeds.
Okay, so that's at the beginning. So when did you find out that you're the sign of the zodiac Cancer?
Yeah, I mean, I knew because you could look in magazines as a kid, you could look and read your horoscope, and I figured out that I was a Cancer, but I didn't really process it until, later in my life, in my 20s, after I decided to explore outside of the Christian fold, so to speak. I I became quite interested in psychedelics. I was dealing with some addiction, and psychedelics provided provided me with a different way of approaching life at the time that also helped me, let go of some opiate addiction problems I was having. And the psychedelic experiences that I had became very important, and then gradually opened the door to things like yoga, astrology, Ayurveda, acupuncture, just so many, the whole world of um, Eastern philosophy, holistic health sort of opened up because of psychedelic experiences that I had. And it was through those that a sort of astrology came in a more fully developed way, where I started going, okay, I'm a Cancer. What does that actually mean?
And can you remember the first time you had a birth chart and you looked at that?
Yeah, let's see. So I moved to New York City after finishing a couple of graduate degrees, and my graduate degrees were in creative writing. And I started getting interested in astrology well before I even ever had a chart reading. And so I was reading books about astrology and then, looking up my chart on the internet, which is what I think a lot of people do.
Oh, was the internet invented then? Oh, because you're born in 1981 when it wasn't.
Yeah, so this was when by the time I got into astrology at a more serious level, it was, 2006, that 7.
Oh, okay, yeah, the websites were up then. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
So did you, is that the first one you ever saw that you went online, you put in your birth date and then pinged the chart? Can you remember what the website was you used?
Oh, I think it was probably like, what is it? Astrodienst, Astro.
The Swiss one, Astrodienst, astro.com.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm
Okay.
pretty sure it was. Yeah.
Okay, that's the one that I teach with. That's the one I use. Oh, okay. And then, so what did you think when you looked at this chart and you saw those bits and bobs and?
Yeah.
You remember what happened?
Well, I mean, I remember the very first thing that I thought was, this is so much more than your sun sign.
Oh.
And that was very compelling. I mean, that really hooked me because I wanted there to be something more to it than, some paragraph in a magazine. I just knew it was no offense to horoscopes or horoscope writing, but that was a really big aha moment for, this is a whole sort of science, And I didn't know what it meant. I felt that the online readouts were somewhat generic. I didn't end up until I moved to New York City.
I mean, somewhat generic. They're all generic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of it made sense. Some of it landed, but a lot of it was like, okay, this is just I can tell this is not someone in the hands of a practitioner, and I need that. So yeah, when I went to New York City, and I moved there, I met of some people, going to yoga classes and, exploring the city and making friends. And I met a woman who read charts for people. So she read my chart for me, and we sat
And when you
down.
say she read your chart, had she printed one off? How did she read it? Did you have it on a computer? What did she do?
We met up at Whole Foods in Union Square in the cafeteria area. We sat down at a table, we ate, and then she pulled out a notebook with a lot of notes, and my chart was printed out. I don't remember what program she had, but and then she just spoke off from her notes to me about my chart, and I was even more hooked. Thought it was pretty cool.
And so did she mention to you then that you got a Taurus ascendant? I mean, what was the first thing you learned about the chart? Was the fact that you got the ascendant in Taurus?
Sun, moon, rising. She did the basic sun, moon, rising, so and Cancer sun, Cap moon, Taurus rising. Did you know you were born under a full moon? Did you know it was the day after it was a lunar, it was a lunar eclipse, full moon, the day on your day of your birth? And these were all brand new concepts to me. She told me about my Mars in Gemini and my, just all sorts of things. And I was blown away. It was really cool.
Bing, bing, bing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
And did that make a big difference to you then?
Yeah, I mean, I already had been bitten by the bug because most of my 20s and throughout those graduate degrees in creative writing, I was writing a book about experiences working with indigenous healers from the Amazon who administered ayahuasca. It's a very potent psychedelic from the Amazon. This was early on before it became super commercial and, every new ager on the planet is, now an ayahuasca expert and everything. This was way before all of that. And I was writing about the experiences in graduate school creatively and in an MFA program in memoir writing.
What does MFA stand for? Sorry.
It's a Master of Fine Arts.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I was writing about these experiences and going back and forth to the Amazon to have further experiences.
Whoa. So you were going out to the Amazon rainforest and stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. So that's a long trek from the US.
Yeah. Yeah.
How many hours is that on the flight?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember I was in Georgia in graduate school. So it was already down south a ways. It was like maybe 6 hours, something like that. 7 hours.
Okay.
And then and then to Iquitos, where you can't get to this lodge that we went to initially without going another day upriver, and then in canoes. And so it was quite an expedition, especially the first time. But those experiences, I had started throughout those experiences to read books about astrology. Liz Green was one of the earliest authors I read a bunch of, and the ceremonies were starting to illustrate the archetypes in really powerful ways. The visionary, dreamlike experience was archetypal, and the way that my psyche was giving meaning to the experiences was quite frequently through the symbols I was starting to read about in books about astrology texts. So that became a really exciting part of my growth, because it was and I think astrologers, when you first start studying astrology, for example, your dreams may help you understand a symbol now or then. And I was getting something like that as a part of what was exciting me and turning me on to the subject.
And then, so you then wrote a book about it. So Fishes of Men, the Gospel of an Ayahuasca, how do you say it? Ayahuasca Vision Quest. Now that book came out on the 15th of July 2010. So that's the day before your birthday. So obviously you were writing that. So you'd done the creative writing course by then, I presume, or were you writing that while you were doing the course?
I was writing my book while the book was the thesis project for the degree.
Got you.
And then I ended up shopping it for publication when I moved to New York City.
Yeah, good idea. My sister's a creative writer. I only do astrology books, but she does the creative writing MA at Bath University, and she's a reader and a poet and blah, 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 blah. She's got a PhD and all the rest of it. So, yeah. So she understands all of that. Cool. Okay. So, and I've read part of it. I haven't read the whole book. I've read some of it. And there's the sad story about your father and the experiences that he had and stuff. So you were sort of trying to make sense of all of this. And just for the record, what sign of the zodiac is your father?
Yeah. So the book, just to comment on that briefly. So the book is and one of the main things that happened during the ayahuasca ceremonies was an exploration of the Christian faith and community that I was raised in, which was being called into question at that point in my life in a very intense way, because my father had this very public fall from grace, so to speak, in a marital affair that was very public, and kind of a loss of his own faith. And so his midlife crisis, so to speak, paralleled a period of exploration and overcoming of addiction. So there was and then my grandfather ended up developing an opiate addiction, which was part of something he was prescribed for serious back pain. But so my grandfather and my father and myself were having parallel mental health challenges and challenges with addiction all simultaneously.
Wow.
And that parallel of the three of us going through that was what I unpacked in the book through these ceremonies and through reflecting upon stories from my father's childhood and my childhood and stuff like that. So it was that formed the backdrop. Now my father is a full moon as well, Aquarius Sun Leo moon.
Oh, well, he's a completely different side of the zodiac combo to you then. So he's an air sign, ideas, and you're a water sign, feelings. Yeah. Okay, that's not going to... I mean, you've got Venus in Leo, so that's a little bit near to your dad's moon, but you haven't got anything in Aquarius, I don't think, have you?
Just the south node of the moon and my midheaven.
And you got your midheaven, yeah. So my parents were... My mother was a convert to Catholicism, and my father was a born Catholic. So my mum was a bit more heavily into it than my dad. She converted when she was 16. So I myself grew up in a very religious household. Didn't even think anything about it until I became a teenager, and then kicked back, and then that was that was the end of the world. And our whole family sort of imploded at one point because somebody had a baby out of wedlock and somebody decided to marry somebody else who wasn't a Catholic. And, but the family did stay together. They were quite a big family. But I found, though, that astrology does seem, correct me if I'm wrong, to fill the shadow of the necessary substitution for religion, because it's not got a dogma. It hasn't got a script that we can read either. It's down to the interpretation. And I think quite a lot of people are drawn to astrology either as a kickback to religion or not even interested in religion at all, but it does give a sort of succor, so to speak. And how do you deal with your Saturn and your Jupiter? Look at them, they're conjunct, they're only a degree apart. That's your belief planet. And it's right. I mean, I've got my Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn, but they're not conjunct. Yours are conjunct in Libra, in a cardinal sign like your sun sign. So how do you cope with the Saturn and Jupiter being conjunct? Does that cause a difficulty in some way?
That's interesting. Well, I mean, going back to the first part of what you said, I think you're right about astrology being, there's a book that I read recently by a Jungian therapist named Jason Smith called Religious But Not Religious.
Oh, yes. And you were talking about fanaticism in one of your videos. I watched that one.
And the subtitle of his book is called Living a Symbolic Life. And to me, astrology is great for people who might be, not so interested in religion or religious commitment, because it doesn't really require anything of you. And yet, if you're looking at your life through the lens of the astrological symbols, it's as if the cosmos is constantly giving you this feedback that you live in a sacred and meaningful place. And I think for many people, that's enough. It's like enough to maybe not know what exists beyond that, but to have a language that reinforces that you live in a sacred universe. I think that's why so I agree with what you're saying there. And then in terms of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, it's interesting because I feel like the recent Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, which trined that in my natal chart, seemed to activate that part of my chart in a way that it had never done before. It's as though, to live through a subsequent Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in an air sign somehow has been bringing that more to the forefront of my awareness. I think it has something to do with, when I think of Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions historically, as you for sure they've been associated with the establishment of a new political regime or a new social or cultural development where an old one may be replaced by a new one, or an old one may be modified by a youthful influence or something like that. I think, for example, the fact that when Jupiter and Saturn were coming together, rock and roll was already very well developed in the world, but MTV was born right precisely at the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So it's this further development and articulation of a tradition and culture. Something like that. The royal wedding, of course, that had some tragedy in it, but the royal wedding happened around that conjunction and stuff like that. So I think I've been a part of trying to marry modern archetypal forms of astrology with a revival of traditional forms. So I see that as a big part, and that's trying to my midheaven. So I see, and Saturn rules my midheaven. So I think Jupiter-Saturn for me is like, I teach a class called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. And I'd say it's equal parts, Liz Green, and equal parts like Vettius Valens, So I think that's probably how it's played out. But it's always had a pretty strong influence in my life in terms of the need for religious practice, but less and less formal as I've aged. Earlier it felt like I needed to belong and identify with a group, and it's progressively become more like I need spiritual practice, I need spiritual community, but it's been less formal and rigid. And I think that's that's been like a softening of that conjunction somehow.
Because family is important for cancer. I mean, every cancer, they've got to have parents and children and cousins and nieces and nephews. Family is really important. I mean, I was a great follower of Donna Cunningham, God bless her, who's now in heaven. And she was a cancer, and a lovely lady she was as well. And that's the only, well, that and Capricorn as well, because Capricorn is also about the family. And then you've got your two major planets in those signs. So, your whole life, now you've created your own family. I presume you've got your own kids, yes?
Yeah.
How many have
Two
you
of
got?
them.
Two. Well done. Okay. So that'll keep you busy. How old are they?
My oldest is 6, about to turn 7 in December.
Uh-huh.
My younger turned 4 in July. So,
right. Oh, yeah. Bless. They're still small. Oh.
Yeah.
And have you got pets as well? You have a dog?
We have 2 dogs.
Oh.
Yeah. Both girls. So I've got 4 girls in that sense, plus my wife. So I'm completely outnumbered.
You're outnumbered. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
And then do you have siblings as well? So you've talked about your parents in your book. And have you got siblings?
One sister who has a couple of kids too. She lives in North Carolina.
Okay, so the family does exist. That is so, so important. I think the most unhappy, sad cancers that I meet are the ones that don't have any sort of family. I knew a lady once who had no family and lived next door to a family, and she dated one of the boys that lived next door, finished with him, and then dated his brother, and then married him, and then carried on. He moved into her house, like it was sort of a next door thing. It was the craziest thing.
Yeah.
I just thought it was funny. She dated one boy, and then she dated the other one, married him, and then he moved in with her, and the brother carried on living next door with the mother. It was like, oh, it was weird. But that was the whole sort of cancer family thing, really, really important. So you've done a lot of astrology. You teach astrology as well. You've got the most amazing YouTube channel, and there's like a bazillion videos on there. And I was very touched to watch your one when you decided that you were going to come back to your name, Adam, and that you were going to leave that. Is it Hare Krishna that you were a member of? That must have been very upsetting for you to. And thank you very much for sharing what you've told us already today. But that must have been an upsetting point for you.
Yeah. I think again, like I've always been for a large part of my life, I have been interested in religious community and have tried a lot of different things on. And I've always been someone who's open to try things. And at our yoga studio, we had a teacher on staff who taught yoga philosophy, who was not the stereotypical image of a Hare Krishna, dancing outside and distributing the Bhagavad Gita in an airport or something. He was a really nice guy. He is a nice guy and really wise. And I started a private apprenticeship with him where, he just started teaching me bhakti yoga. And Gaudiya Vaishnavism is one form of bhakti from India. And when it came, one strain of it came to, or one strand, I guess, came to the West in the 1960s. That was then called the Hare Krishna movement. But it was a lot like some of the other yogic teachers who came to the West and had a big influence. But it was more characteristically known and sometimes poked fun of because one of the, I guess you could say, missions of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas has typically been to distribute the Bhagavad Gita. Because the teachings of Krishna are very important to the Vaishnavas. So it was, but this was the way that the Hare Krishna movement exists now is quite a bit different than the movement, the countercultural movement in the 60s. It's a lot more developed and, represented all over the world and stuff like that. And so I got involved because I felt very much at home in the practice of yoga already, owning a yoga studio. And then the core of Krishna Bhakti being about devotion to God. And, you know, whether people believe in God or not, no big deal to me, but that the daily devotional practices are, you know, aimed at softening the heart. And that's the core of Krishna Bhakti. So I got into it, but it was a very demanding path, a path that to become initiated in requires that you take a series of vows, lifestyle practices, many of which I was finding to be just too austere for who I am and where I'm at. Although my basic spiritual nature and interest in spiritual things like meditation, prayer, yoga hasn't changed a bit. But it came to a point where you receive a name too. So I had received the name Achyuta Bhava and had a guru and everything. And it really was nothing against any of them. I found that there were progressive, open-minded, liberal people and niches within the community. And like any other religious community, there were fanatics, you know. So it wasn't like very much different in that sense from any other religious community I've been a part of. And I didn't leave because of anything scandalous. It was just a realization that it was not quite the right fit for me and a little too austere. And so so that was hard. I think the hardest part about it wasn't so much figuring out where I stood philosophically or theologically, but what was challenging was that I had taken on the public persona of the initiated name that I took, and which I was very excited about at the time, but you know, within the years afterward, began to realize just it hadn't been the right choice. So it was more, for me, it was more about the embarrassment of publicly wanting to, you know, change my name back, leaving the tradition. I have friends that are still a part of it. I'm still in communication with mentors who were in that community. So
it's not like you left on bad terms.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't like that at all. But there are elements of the Hare Krishna tradition that I just found to be too conservative for my personality. And so I you know, it was just the biggest challenge was trying to communicate that change publicly when I knew it might be quite embarrassing.
I think the moon was in Scorpio the day you did that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And you've got Uranus retrograde on your descendant in Scorpio, and you've probably got something going on with the present Uranus transit in Taurus. I don't think they're exactly opposite, but they're getting that way.
It's squaring my ascendant ruler though, and as Saturn was opposing it, and so the feeling of being confined and simultaneously needing to break free, you know, that was a big part of it.
But it's funny. Funny is the wrong word. It's amazing how when something happens to you, there'll always be a transit that explains it.
Oh yeah.
Nothing can happen and a transit can't explain it. I'm terribly into transit, I'm afraid. I spend all day doing transits.
Me too.
And you've got your natal Pluto in Libra, and you're just coming up to the end of Pluto being in Capricorn, maybe another year and a bit, and you've got your moon in Capricorn. So you would have spent the whole of your life experiencing Pluto doing something somewhere in some house in your chart, and then voomf, it's going to go towards your MC, but it's not going to have the same impact. But it's going to go, you know, further into your chart, which is empty now of planets, and Pluto is going to like bye-bye, finished with that. That's going to surely be a sense of release for you, because people with bowl-shaped charts like yourself and pretty sort of clustered and stuff, to have a lengthy Pluto lifetime transit, and then that's it. You're never going to get a conjunction ever again. If I was you, I'd be looking forward to that. No.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't have. I don't have a sense of what it could mean that Pluto's. I look at whole signs, and I'm thinking of the ingress moving into my 10th house relatively soon, the midheaven relatively soon, and the south node. I have no idea what that could mean, because it would seem to point to some kind of change in my public reputation, or maybe my work. And it's hard for me to imagine, because I'm like, well, I'm doing astrology. What else would I be doing? And so it's hard to imagine what kind of changes that might indicate. And so I've been kind of like, and I started astrology, basically started getting interested in it seriously as Pluto entered the 9th. Right. So it's just like, I don't know anything professionally as an astrologer outside of Pluto in my ninth house. So this should be interesting.
Yeah, and well, you'll have to report back to us what happens when it does, because we're not going to know until it does. Because I also noticed when you had that first, so when you had the first astrological meeting, and you were having a Saturn return at that point. So I think I've popped the chart in the chat, but that's the time that you've created the organisation Nighttime Astrology, and you're having a little party to sort of celebrate it and stuff.
Oh, Nightlight Astrology.
What did I say?
You said nighttime? It's Nightlight Astrology.
Night. Sorry, yes, night.
Now I see. Now it's funny because I'm seeing the birth chart here that you put in,
and I put the transits for 26th of August 2010.
Let me
so
just
I put
see.
two charts.
Yeah. There it is. Yeah, okay, there it is. I see.
So that's the transits for the night that you then created the organisation. I think you had a little party. The date was on your blog. I just wondered whether or not.
I've never even looked at this before. Maybe I did, but it's been a long time since I've looked at this.
Well, that's 2010. We're 2022 now. But that's because you'd put in your blog, come along, and you were inviting people, and you'd created the organisation, like Astrology. And I just thought, oh, look at Saturn. How conjunct is that? So Saturn, you've got 4 degrees Libra, and that night it was 3 degrees 26. I mean, that's pretty much a conjunction.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that definitely was the theme is, okay, this is my Saturn return.
Yeah. And Saturn returns because a lot of people when they, I mean, I'm 62, so I've had my second one as well. And my first one was, I've got Saturn natally in Capricorn, nothing happened. Saturn return, nothing happened. It was normal. It was like, but some people, they're very nervous. Budding astrologers are very nervous about Saturn returns. And I tend to think that they're great because that means you're an adult now. You could tick the box. I've grown up,
Right.
But you've got that then, and I think the sun was in Virgo and the moon was in Pisces. That was it. The other thing I saw then, I thought, oh, bless, that's nice. And Pluto had just sort of started going through Capricorn, hadn't been there for too long. And then how was that night? Can you remember? Did anybody turn up? Did you have a good evening?
It was so crazy because what happened was I was blogging for a popular website called Reality Sandwich, and Reality Sandwich was dedicated to at the time what was very popular was the 2012 Mayan calendar prophecies. And wrapped into the 2012 culture on that website was an interest in psychedelics and alternative healing. And I mean, it was a very diverse, far-reaching publication that had a lot of interesting people on it. Alex Gray and all sorts of cutting-edge scientists who were looking at neuroscience and consciousness. And so I was writing for this website, and it was that website that brokered the deal for my book.
Okay.
So they were so then they set up and sent me on a book tour. And during that time, I had left my job and was seriously studying astrology, and so a series of things happened, and they essentially felt bad for me because I started working for a yoga studio, trying to follow my bliss, and the yoga studio turned out very quickly to be going under.
Oops.
And so then I was left without a job because I'd left a nice job as a social worker. And I was collecting unemployment, going on a book tour, studying astrology. And I just told the Reality Sandwich editor, who I was close friends with, who had been helping me edit the book and was prepping me for this book tour, I'm going to do astrology. I'm going to give it a go while I'm collecting unemployment. I'm just going to try to launch this thing. Mm-hmm. And I could really use the help of Reality Sandwich promoting my launch party. Because I was a well-known blogger and now author and speaker about ayahuasca, I sort of asked, and they were like, of course, well, we'd be glad to help you. So they helped promote it, and oh gosh, I think it was like 50 or 60 people showed up.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was a big showing.
Mm.
And mostly people who were interested in my work in relation to psychedelics and ayahuasca,
Mm.
but they were curious, like, what's this guy doing with astrology? And from that group that night, probably 30, 40 people ended up signing up to be a part of a regular meetup group. So I led people through very basic 12 signs, the 12 houses, the meaning of the planets, that kind of thing. And they, in exchange, they donated, everyone could donate what they wanted to per meeting. So just kind of like a donation bucket. And that's how it got started.
Wow. Oh, that's lovely. That sounds really nice. I love how people start doing things. I think it's great. And so you are a prolific writer. I mean, how many words are you churning out a day?
Oh, well, actually, so I mean, the main thing is that I make YouTube videos every day now.
Yeah, I
It
know,
all
but you've got to write blurb for that, and then you also write your blog, and then you also what you've got in the videos, you that's written as well.
Yeah, so the writing, actually, we have a transcription service. So I don't do any of that writing. It's just being transcribed directly from the video
Okay.
and then edited and republished on the website by some of my staff. And then the writing for my newsletter every day is hired out. And so I do very little writing at this point anymore. It's all hired by people that, I hired the people who work for me to do the writing. But for a lot of years, I mean, everything that you're seeing now on YouTube 5 days a week was done in written form for like 6 years before I transferred over to YouTube.
Mm. Okay, so that's
So it
on your
used to be
blog.
that way.
So if I go back to the beginning of your blog, that's you writing that. Yes?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. I was saying there's tons of words on there.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, how many words is it for a thesis? 80,000, 100,000?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. You're probably doing quite a few thousand per day. I mean, my books are 10,000 words, if that, and I've just managed to squeeze another 10,000 words out of another book. I don't write very many words. I don't write more. Okay, so let's go back to today then. So where are you go? Because you're a cardinal sign, we need to talk about the future. Where would you like your astrology to go? Where are you aiming for now? Where's Adam going?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things that I mean, my client practice is very busy, and my classes are, busy, and content creation keeps me busy. So I don't have as much time to develop things on the creative end. My daily content that I make on YouTube is my creative outlet, but I think I'd like to write something again at some point, like maybe a book. So I think eventually I'd like to find a way of restructuring my time and my schedule, so that I have some space for a new writing project. I'm content to let that wait a little bit until my kids are just a little bit older. Because right now it's also, when they're in school, when they're both in school completely full time, it'll be a little bit easier to write, I think. But yeah, and then I think the big project right now is all of my online courses since the beginning, since year one, day one, have been at least some portion of the students attending have attended by donation. It started off all by donation, and then over the years, it developed into standardized prices with a tuition assistance option. And I always believed that astrology should be accessible, that it's a spiritual topic that shouldn't be afforded to only people who have money, because it can really change your life in positive ways to have a astrological vocabulary. So I felt very passionate about that, and we've always had tuition assistance so that no one's ever priced out of the programs. But in the beginning, I also started doing readings by donation. Now, eventually, I couldn't maintain that. I had to set prices. But I would like to, in the next year, what we're planning on doing is developing a donation reading service so that alumni who come through my program can have a rotation to get some experience. Oftentimes, people have trouble just getting experience reading. And then in exchange, people who can't afford a reading with, say, a professional astrologer who has a rate that's a lot of professional astrologers, their rate might be $100, $200, it could be quite high. So we're trying to set something up so that people who are low income could pay something that's really reasonable and get an hour-long reading with someone who's graduated from one of my programs.
So how different is the pricing of it? Because American astrologers charge crazy amounts of money compared to what I charge, £65 and £70, depending on what the reading is, and the cheapest I charge is £50, and pounds and dollars aren't that far apart.
Right.
And I'm always talking about this on the podcast. I've got a client who lives in London who's just like stupidly rich. It's like mega bucks person. He's forever telling me off that I don't charge enough. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I'm not changing my prices. I've had those prices for years and years. I don't do them. I don't raise them. I don't want to earn loads of money because I don't want to pay loads of tax. And I'm quite happy at the level of income that I've had an existence where I did live in Switzerland and my parents were very rich and I saw some incredibly rich people and it put me off rich. Okay, didn't want to go there. So I'm quite happy on the lower income that I'm at, but I'm constantly getting told off by this person that I should charge more. And I go, actually, I don't want to, because I don't want to attract those types of people into my practice. However, I've noticed in America, you would not be able to charge those prices in the UK because in the UK, people, don't really know much about, they get astrology and astronomy terribly. It only happened last week. Somebody called me an astrologer and I told them I was an astrologer, but they were talking to me like I was an astronomer. And it's like, no, I'm not, and the interview went totally in the wrong direction. But anyway, but those sort of high price points can then make it more tricky to get regular income. I have lower prices but regular, so people come back more and I like to see more because I don't like being quiet, sort of thing. And that's always when people start out in practice, they think, oh, I don't know if I should charge anything. And I go, well, you've got to charge something. And in the UK it's equivalent to if you went and had a massage or you went and had a chiropractic session. So the prices that are charged with astrologers in the UK is similar to going to see a therapist. Well, I don't know what the prices people charge for therapists in the US. But and also in America, astrology is much more accepted. You would not believe, like, I don't talk to my neighbors what I do for a living. They don't understand it.
Right.
They wouldn't even know what it was. Oh, they might know what, most people in the UK do know what sign of the zodiac they are, but that's probably about it. There used to be television programs that had astrology on, and then it went through this sort of science thing, and so it doesn't happen now. And there was a time when I was on radio regularly, and I got chucked off the BBC program because they didn't do it anymore. So in the UK, astrology is way down, but in the US, it's big, it's everywhere. Everybody knows about it, talks about it, and I think it's quite unusual. This Hellenistic astrology, and which is very big in America. Again, that's not heard much in the UK, and I wonder why that is. Why do you think that is, Adam?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, I mean, I certainly don't have any. However people choose to structure their business, I'm respectful of. So, but yeah, I think in the U.S. there's if you're as a lot of astrologers are also developing content on social media. So they're for example, like I have an audience that I'm speaking to every day of 50,000 people. So,
yeah, I know.
And so with that comes more demand for readings. And if there's more demand, then, from a business standpoint, I think I support people setting their prices according to, the demand that they have, as long as you're looking at other people who are around your same level of ability, experience, and popularity. So I set my rates, for example, according to what some of my colleagues are setting who have a similar platform and visibility and, and experience level and stuff like that. And I try to be very sensitive to that. And I think, for me, it's like I've got 2 kids and I'm the breadwinner. And so, for me, it's a business and trying to do as well as I can without feeling, like I'm pushing people, into a space that where it feels like, they're paying too much. So, and I think everyone has to set that sort of individually, but that's also specifically why, I feel like the donation-based clinic is really important to me. It's a big goal in the next year because it's always been important to me that, like, okay, I've got a price for my classes, and it's not for everyone. The price is kind of exclusive in that sense. It's not, it's not, I don't think it's overboard, but it is an expensive class, because it's a really good one. But then on the other hand, I don't think anyone should be priced out of taking a good astrology class. So we have the, donation-based option for people who need it. And we really try to help people in that way. And that's what I want to do with readings as well, so that people come to say, like, okay, well, like, a reading with Adam's a little bit more expensive and it's a long wait time. But if I'm lower budget, there's a staff of amazing people who are trying to get experience, and I can pay what I can actually afford for those readings. Oh, I really want to take the class. I can't make the full price, so I can apply for the tuition assistance. So try to make sure that there's options for people so that I'm doing well as a business and thriving, but also.
Oh wow! So you offer tuition assistance. Sorry, I that sort of whizzed over my head and it didn't sink in what you meant. So like you give people sort of like a grant or subsidize them so they can have it cheaper. Wow. Okay, that's kind.
And that's the same idea of what we're trying to do with readings next. So at any rate, all of that being said, though, I don't know why. I think the Project Hindsight, which was the project that was largely responsible for reintroducing Hellenistic astrology into the modern era of astrology, was a US-based project, a translation project that was rooted in the United States. So I think it took hold here a bit more than it did in the UK, where you have people like Deb Holding, Sky Script, the Jeffrey Cornelius, and the people like Sue Ward, and all these horary astrologers that were becoming popular, and then you have a strong modern tradition too. And so I just think, for whatever reason, like horary is way more popular in the UK than it is in the United States, and I think that's an interesting thing too. I think it has to do with where some of these movements were being developed, and so I had Jeffrey come and speak with my students in New York City early on. And they were all just blown away to even learn that such a thing as horary existed. They had no idea even what it was. And I barely did too. So it was,
Oh, horary is marvellous. And there's also the chart of the moment. So the time that the client books for the reading, if they don't turn up at that time, or they turn up early or late, the chart of the moment, I love that. I do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally. It's funny because in my live classroom, we'll have clients come in and I'll read for them, and then after they leave, the students will be able to ask questions about the reading. And one of the things that often comes up is, look at what transits we're perfecting, especially with the moon right as the reading was taking place, And so it's a great way to learn more about how what was said in a reading and why it was said, just like, well, what was the moon doing?
Yeah, and then also timing is so important. And these are things that you don't even think about until you become an astrologer. Like, we just had the Queen die. Okay, so the Queen's been on the throne for absolutely ages. And there was the official time that she died, and there was like, I just thought, well, that's not going to be the true time. And then the supposedly true time. And the Astrological Journal just came out this week, and there was a proposition that she died at least 2 or 3 hours before the advertised time. And then I don't know about you, but I'm terribly into the time that things happen, the time that a client will send an email, the time that it arrives in my inbox. There's always a lot of sort of Scorpio ascending or something sort of Scorpio going on, the inquiry about a reading and stuff. But timing is something that I never even thought of until I get into astrology. And now it's like, what time is that? We just had a baby get born in the family. It's like, okay, what time is the baby born? Oh, okay, baby's got a Libra ascendant, So.
Yep.
Because we don't have in the UK, this is the biggest grouse that UK people have, is that the time of birth is not on the birth certificate. And you're so lucky in America, you have the time of birth in there. So all your charts are correct. I spend a lot of time having to estimate charts for people or just do signs of the zodiac and planets in signs, because we're just not going to know. It's not official. So you're so lucky. And then when your children were born, so were you busily writing down the times?
No, I I noted the time, but I waited to cast both of their charts until they were a year old, because I didn't,
fair enough, yeah.
I just wanted to get to know them a little bit, because I'm just I think about astrology all the time, and I didn't want it to be clouding my getting to know them.
Yes, yeah, very wise. But you did make a note at the time, I take it, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for speaking with us today, Adam. It's been fascinating. It's really nice. You've got a lovely voice. I think part of the joy of, watching the YouTube channel and the things that you do, you definitely, I'm not saying that you've got a preacher's son's voice, but you do have a very, very nice, it's a nice, easy voice to listen to. And with me running a podcast, I know that for sure. There's certain voices that people can listen. I'm actually a hypnotherapist as well, but the voice that you have really makes a difference to whether or not people can understand what you're saying. So I think your delivery and your actual voice, obviously we have to thank the planets and your parents for that, is beautiful. It's absolutely lovely.
Oh, thank you. That means so much to me, and I like yours too. I just was excited to look at some of the other episodes in your podcast and stuff like that, and I was like, oh, this is going to be nice to speak with Mary.
Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.